believers of the television. 33 with a double E, yeah. WWWWF. Now you're out of breath.
Okay, we are live on this very important, I want to say hoax anniversary, but I don't know if this is a major hoax date yet, but there's some forecasted for 11/3. Very significant date for a lot of reasons, which we'll talk about today. I mean, we've been looking at this date. One of the things that really galvanized this channel and our approach was 11/3/2019. We were analyzing just loads of predictive programming, and we're like, Seattle's going to get it. Space Needle's going to burn. And there were 3,000 of us between our channel and Tim Truth watching. And I think Reverse History was there that day. And we were just watching the Space Needle. Well, a Space Needle in Turkey burned. And we walked away sort of disappointed. We had a consolation prize, a burning Space Needle. So our prediction wasn't totally off. But then I remember I think Copaesthetic had said, it's probably 3/11. And I didn't want to even, I was like, okay, I'm not into this predicting dates, and I hate having to make it look like we're guessing based on some kind of vague prophecy when we're just analyzing predictive programming as a predictive model. Well, fast forward to March, and the Sunday before the declaration of the pandemic on 3/11, we had a live stream that said World War III begins Seattle, Ground Zero, 3/11, and we were vindicated. So it's somewhat interchangeable. These dates, 3/11, 11/3, you can't separate 11/3 from 9/11. All these numbers are integrated. The One World Trade Tower opened up on 11/3, 2014, 13 years after the twins went down. A lot of fascinating esoterica. I'm starting a new thing. That's not a new thing. It's something I used to do. I have a WordPress blog, which I kind of stopped using as a primary because Substack is so much better. However, I used to do this thing called IPS Points of Interest, where throughout the day I would just add onto a blog of things that I think are worth discussing on that particular date. And I have my minds.com, where I just data dump all kinds of receipts and links. But here I'm trying to be a little more concise, and so it's just another place to go. It's insider.online, and this is where the tabloid's going to be promoted. It would have been nice to have had some copies of the tabloid to hand out to the MAGA zombies, or MAGA sheep. I mean, people don't want me to call sheep, but you have to remember that media skeptics have both the intellectual and moral high ground. We're not participating in the Psy-War. We're conscientious objectors. They're actually in it. So don't feel like you have to treat them with kid gloves, because they can take it. And I'll go through some of the comments. There's a really great YouTube channel. I'll go ahead and post a link to it. A channel that often promotes or links to some of the really nice, some of the best crisis actor footage that you can find online. And they asked me if they could mirror the video, and of course I said yes. Everyone can go ahead and mirror the auto hoaxer at the Trump rally video. And let me see what he called it. Anyway, the channel I'm referencing is called The News is Fake 4, which I presume means the first 3 were deleted, but he mirrored it on his channel. And here's a sample of the work he does.
Emotional afternoon for churchgoers at Lakewood. Fox 26's Ruben Dominguez caught up with some of them as they were leaving the scene. He continues our team coverage tonight.
But we did see one reunion, and it was a joyful reunion, and we got to speak to one woman who was very happy to find.
Now this is from the News is Fake channel, and I'm going to go ahead and put a link so you can subscribe. A lot of their subscribers have been joining our channel today, and I'll read through some of their comments. Continuing.
And her friends that were inside of Lakewood Church when this happened.
They're part of the worship team, yes.
How did you guys get separated?
I wasn't here. We were at our church, and they're the worship team. They were singing when the incident happened.
And how happy were you to see that they were all right, that they were safe?
Great. They just don't have their purse or phones or nothing.
Hilarious. Anyway, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this is just a sample. I've been going through some of this stuff, and it's interesting because it's one of the dead giveaways that something is fake. It's interesting to compare it to events that are real. For example, there was a shooting in Orlando. I think there were two separate shooters, but there was handguns, some kind of big street event, crowds of people, 8 wounded, 2 dead, and nothing about it rang fake to me. And they did bring out someone who was shot, and he didn't seem like an actor to me. I don't preemptively call everything fake. And there are a number of reasons why that particular event didn't seem fakeable to me. Namely, it wasn't a closed set behind closed doors, and we only get information secondhand. No, we had video instantaneously, multiple vantage points, and it wouldn't necessarily have been out in the open in front of hundreds of people. Very hard to simulate a mass casualty drill with thousands of people running around. It wasn't like Vegas where it was a closed-off paddock. But having analyzed it, I haven't seen any of the typical red flags. But last night I started watching Apocalypse Z, The Beginning of the End. #1 movie in the US. So I have this new habit. I watch whatever's #1 because I know for a fact, and I can predict it. I predict the predictive programming. I know anything that's #1 is going to have some concurrent programming relevance. So for example, Bad Monkey comes out the same day the WHO releases this news release they had about how the monkey virus or whatever is a global threat. This is a consistent pattern. The other night I watched Canary Black, and it's about a digital nuke courtesy of Putin. And I thought, why would they put that out there? Because they want these ideas in your head so when they reference it on the news, you have a basis for understanding what they're talking about. It's programming, not a coincidence. Well, yesterday there was talk about I think it was Frank the raccoon, and the squirrel named Peanut, who were owned by some OnlyFans couple, and they were using the animals to draw attention to their OnlyFans. I don't know the whole story, but their animals were seized by the state and killed because they had to see if they had rabies, and I guess you can only find out after they're dead or something. I don't know if that's absolutely true, but that's what I heard. So these animals were killed, and a lot of people are mad about it. And it's kind of like interesting how the right wing was mad at the left for open borders and immigrants eating their pets. That story passed. Now, the right wing is mad at the left and the government because government overreach is allowing government to go in and take their pets. So why are they threatening pets? That's kind of interesting in itself because it's a pattern I'm seeing. Anyway, this movie Apocalypse Z, #1, a rabies-like disease spreads across the planet, transforming people into aggressive creatures. So kind of a generic zombie apocalypse thing. I haven't even finished it. I'm not even impressed. I just noted it's #1, and it's got rabies in the title. And rabies is kind of a big story right now. Let me go and see if there's any headlines. I believe they said, it was Peanuts and Frank. Social media sensation Peanut the squirrel euthanized for rabies testing. Elon Musk fumes after social media sensation Peanut the squirrel is euthanized. So yeah, rabies was a big story yesterday, and now you have a #1 trending show on Amazon about rabies. So let me go ahead and gloss over, just really quick, I want to read through the list. So the points of interest, Trump shooting through the media comment. Yeah, Trump has engaged in some stochastic terrorism, just putting it out there. Shooting through the media would be necessary to get to him. The AFCEA Atlanta Homeland Security Conference 11.5 tabletop exercise. So this tabletop exercise has to do with some kind of, I believe, a digital nuke scenario, just like in Canary Black. Back to the Future, You're Fired. There's a clip I have we'll get to where Biff Tannen, it's Marty, Michael J. Fox gets fired. You're fired is Trump's trademark phrase. We'll go to that. There's some fascinating stuff we've missed. Like, this is something that I'm surprised I missed. We often referenced Machete. 2010 Machete. The Trump-like Senator Robert De Niro is shot while giving a speech about illegal immigrants, just like Trump was when he was shot. And we talked about these similarities before, how it relates to the Joker shooting De Niro's character, the Joker being based on Travis Bickle, who inspired real-life assassin John Hinckley Jr. to shoot Reagan. So we've gone over this ad nauseum. However, one thing that we missed, and it was pointed out by Synchromorpheus, that Daniel Trejo, who plays Machete, was in a parade on July 4th, and somebody hit him with a water balloon. Very JFK-esque. And we were noting this because of his role in that movie. Well, it turns out that in Machete, he is shot in the ear. So yes, De Niro's character gets shot, but you also have this element where he's gruesomely shot in the ear. Way more fake blood than what Trump got. And a lot of people noticed this immediately. So we've noticed some similarities. This is from 3 months ago. This whole plot came to mind when that Trump stuff went down. So funny, I wasn't the only one thinking the same thing. POV, Trump, 20 minutes ago. So on the very day that Trump was shot in the ear, a lot of people immediately had as their frame of reference Machete and noticed the similarities that we're pointing out. So let me go ahead and play that clip if you haven't seen it. And we have gone over this before, but again, I'm just going to show you the part where the character Machete, the assassin, gets shot in the ear, because that's just another element to it. Okay, so here we are. He's in the book depository. Okay, here we go. There you go. Shot right in the ear. What do you make of that? Fascinating. Let me go ahead and go through the comments. Let's see who's here. We've got Frank Murray, Green Smoke, Mr. Robot, Greg R, Diana South, Osher, Armin Ree, I, Fepe 73, 1900 Shed Dog says, I'm very concerned about the latest Penguin episode, whereby they showed an explosion in the subway underneath Gotham. Yeah, and again, Penguin references the 11/5 flood from the Batman film, which correlated to the real-world Flood the Polls GOP messaging, and the Riddler correlates to Q, and the QAnons relate to the Riddler's army, who commit the acts of terrorism against the election. And this all connects to QAnon in another way, because QAnon is tied to Anonymous, the Guy Fawkes mask. November 5th is, of course, Guy Fawkes Day. So you have a number of overlapping fictional universes. As I said yesterday, or yeah, I think it was, we're in the Disney universe, Planet Netflix, and in the city of Gotham. Although it's kind of overlapping with a few others at different times. There were no planes, says good evening. Quay says hello, auto hoax folks. Eric Stevens says Pirate Captain Osmond launched the raft. Yes. Joined by Pippi Langstruff, HLG, Lean Dion, Dave Peck says Marcus Allen's back in the limelight. Good. I have to catch up with Fakeologist. We're going to be live with Fakeologist tomorrow. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So I'll send out notifications. 144K says he's just here spreading some love. Appreciate it. Okay, 1900 Shed Dog says this level of precision is not done by human hands. No. We're talking about writing history by fabricating the news on a daily basis and having synchronizing, as a matter of practice, synchronize all of the entertainment messaging to correspond with future news. So it's a form of foreshadowing. Nothing mystical about it. The numerical precision is no more mysterious than when they make a movie and they have foreshadowing. And what happens at the end and the resolution corresponds to what you saw hinted at throughout the film. Look at the movies with Easter eggs, with multiple levels of subtexts, Kubrick in particular. That's human hands. The argument that this is so complex it had to be an AI or computer thing, that's kind of a played out, misleading and unsatisfactory explanation, and it relies on the divine fallacy. It's all human hands. Synchromysticism falls short. I mean, at a certain point, it made sense. There's no way that all these things can be coincidence. Yeah, you're right. You're halfway there. It can't be coincidence. But just because it's not a coincidence doesn't therefore mean you rule in the mystical non-human. No, it means that these are engineered synchronicities. That's the nature of advertising and propaganda. You know, we're just talking about saturating your psyche with ideas and narratives and playing on it later. And just as advertising leads to a buying decision at some point, the propaganda eventually sells you on the future news. It's not mysterious. We have to demystify it. So in 2024, in the last 2 years in particular, we have caught so many examples of precise concurrent programming that, yeah, you have to say it's intrinsic to media. It's actually a part of it. It's systemic fakery, hoaxery, manipulation, news bending. But the other part of it that became clear is that the predictive programming only foreshadows fake events. So you can't tell me that non-human influences are hinting at future fake events. Doesn't make sense. It makes zero sense. And moreover, the fact that these events all have political utility also suggests, well, unless you can argue that the divine agency behind synchronicity and predictive programming is a liberal Democrat, you don't really have a case. Because that's the kind of messaging you get. It's super targeted. For example, I was tired of watching the news, the Roe v. Wade leak, marching protesters because the men are going to regulate their wombs and it's going to drag us back to the dark ages. So I'm like, let me watch something on HBO. So I turn on Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, and it opens up with a scene where the queen is dying in childbirth because she had no bodily autonomy. And the state, even though she's the most powerful woman in the kingdom, they needed the male child more than her. She was killed in a botched, it was just a horrible graphic scene. But it was like, wait a minute here. That perfectly correlates to what we're seeing on the world stage. And yet, for that to be true, whenever they produced this series, they would have had to have known that the Roe v. Wade leak was going to happen, as it had in 1973, 50 years prior. And it doesn't require an AI. We don't have to. There's no purpose to saying, like, here's an analogy that I've used before, because there are a lot of people who get really squirmy when you say man is doing it. You're being lied to by men. They want to believe it's something higher. Okay, what if we were told? Computer hacking is too complicated for men to do. Human hands cannot hack computers. It must therefore be gremlins. So then we all accept the premise that gremlins are responsible for all hacking. Well, if we accept that premise, then nobody ever arrests the hacker. Any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic. And so that doesn't mean it is magic. It specifically says it's indistinguishable from magic. Doesn't mean it is magic. So the media and these synchronicities, these alignments, these coincidences, the media calls them eerie coincidences. It's not magic. It's easy to explain. But it looks like magic. So I can understand why you're mystified, but not in 2024. I can understand being mystified by the media synchronicities in 2018, maybe 2020, but we have it on lockdown as far as determining what we're actually looking at. Predictive, concurrent, reinforcing programming. It's all done by the same group. And this has been done since before AI was even a trendy topic. So, and by the way, AI, as we talk about it, you're not talking about some sentient being manipulating anything. You're talking about a glorified search engine that only responds to what is fed into it in advance. So anyway, we've already dispensed with that kind of mysticism. There's no ghost, there's no genie in the computer doing this stuff, and it isn't beyond the capability of man. Some will say, and there's a lot of misinformation about this, misunderstandings, I'll say, because I don't think it's deliberate. Some say that Stanley Kubrick was dropping hints that he was involved in these mass manipulations. And no, because there are dozens of metascriptors that are involved in the same psyops that contributed predictive programming leading to the same psyops that Kubrick did. So he's not unique. He's not special. He's one of the best. He directed not just Apollo 11, the JFK assassination, but also suggestions that the Trump shooting was part of his design, as well as 2020, which we can talk about. Predictive programming exists. It's misunderstood by truthers. It's denied by mainstreamers, but it exists. Joined by Patricia Steer. Lord Laney says, when in doubt, it's advisable to auto-hoax. Yeah, exactly. Why jump to a conclusion that overlooks the facts and leaves you with some foggy non-explanation that mystifies? And that's what they want you. They want you mystified. They want you confused. And I'm not confused. I don't look at some event and say, I can't tell if it's real or fake. Like, no, I'm pretty decisive. I know why I believe what I believe. I know why I reject certain claims. I'm an informed non-believer. I'm really against confusion, And anybody promoting confusion just needs to drop the pretense. There's no excuse for being confused. Truthers will often just say, I'm just asking questions. Well, you can find the answers. This is the information age. It's lazy to admit confusion. Okay, continuing. 1900 Shed says, primitive AI tools like ChatGPT and AI art generators are kids' toys. They're not real AI. Yeah, see, the quote, real AI sounds to me like some kind of construct for atheists to believe in a higher power, like some kind of God construct. But ultimately, no, what we're talking about here is not some kind of paranormal speculation. We're just talking about the facts. The reason for eerie coincidences, as the media describes these, in media that emulate and predict real-world events, is because that's part of the design. They use the predictive programming in the form of entertainment to tap into your subconscious. That's how they get into you through entertainment, where you're a passive recipient of the programming. When it comes to the news, you're more active. And so if you look at the active, passive elements, passive is subconscious, lunar. Active is the solar, the conscious waking mind. And that's why Kubrick has the eclipse, the sun and the moon, the two into one above the monolith. It's about how they've merged the movie world with the real world through entertainment and news. And they've been doing this for a long time. It's standard operating procedure, and it's global in scale. And to illustrate that, just look at the moon landing. America didn't fake the moon landing to trick the Russians. All the governments faked the moon landing to trick the masses, because there's an ability to maintain a knowledge discrepancy, a sense that there is a programming class. But my contention, and this is the only thing that makes sense to me, is that the programmers themselves are not fully illuminated as to the scope of the fakery. It has to be a very limited number of people. We have the advantage of not being a part of their compartmentalized system, so we can get the big picture view. We don't have to take the blood oaths, sign the NDAs. We don't have to drink the baby blood or go to P. Diddy parties. We just get the info through crowdsourcing. Okay, continuing. Leo Pirate says, you'll be surprised how many atheists truly believe in the silicone-based life. I almost think people like Ray Kurzweil are intentionally pushing such thinking, even though they know better. Yeah, think about the guy who coined the term singularity, John von Neumann, like new man. This is not a new concept. I've been saying before that aliens are basically angels that atheists will believe in. Space is a heaven that atheists will believe in. Virus is a sin that you can use to, it's just an iteration of sin. And atheists, again, will believe in it. Atheists will laugh at the idea of an angry God that's going to flood the land if you don't change your wicked ways. They think Noah's funny. But then they believe in NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, who has a white bird as a logo, all the same iconography, and it basically says, change your wicked ways or there's going to be a flood. We live in the same, I think it's a reiteration of an older paradigm, but it's basically built around a agreed upon consensus worldview with certain God constructs to keep us in order, and then the priesthood who can mediate between these gods and us. So they can take you to heaven, to space, to the utopia above. They can mitigate the flood god. They can get rid of the devil running around. The virus thing was basically, the pandemic was something where the state could offer salvation. So you have the division between the saved and the unsaved. The unsaved refused the injectable Eucharist and do not listen to the mainstream media, which is the de facto state church. So you have this perfect divide. It's almost like Catholic Protestant, totally controlled. But you're right about that. So my point being here is that the atheists are not real atheists. They're faux atheists because they accept the God constructs. They accept on faith the cosmography they've been given. It's not entirely based on a science. It's not like they've tested it. It's not even testable in that sense. Leo Pirate says, are you familiar with the concept of Mechanical Turk? Yes, I am. Yes. Mechanical Turk, playing chess, given the appearance of being autonomous. Yeah, it's an old trick. Kind of like Sophia, the robot they brought out at the UN. They kind of put her away when Greta showed up, but Sophia, of course, was that robot. I think Jimmy Fallon and Will Smith were making out with it. And it was always just puppeteered. And by the way, the Optimus robots that Elon Musk had, They looked like they were autonomous. No, they were being remotely operated. The Tesla bot is totally a hoax. And there were a couple of news articles that talked about how it was a hoax. Tesla's Optimus robots are fake. You believe this? They'll never say his rockets are fake. If you missed it, Tesla's Optimus robots, which Elon Musk claims could one day be the biggest selling product of all time, are not quite what they seem. Instead of being autonomous, they're controlled by robots behind the scenes. So imagine you bring one home and you got 3 remote workers. One of them walks it around, one of it does the voice, and the other one does other functions that you ask it to do. Like, this is fake. But don't worry, his rockets are real. That's real. But there's a lot of people saying this is fake. It's like, what the hell? Cognitive dissonance. Tominoid says, some show called Special Ops Lioness 2023 Season 1 finale, they use joy as the kill confirmation code. Kamala Joy Killer. Interesting. Yeah, I've used Amazon's Mechanical Turks once. I've looked into that before, but what I'm thinking here, like, the AI concept isn't new. You have HAL 9000 from 2001 Space Odyssey. You have Skynet from Terminator 2. You have Pandora, the sentience. And then the WEF 666. It's in their logo, so they want you to say it. The WEF has this thing called Gaia. And Gaia is the name of the Earth God. The World Economic Forum launches global initiative to advance the promise of responsible artificial intelligence. It's called Global AI Action Alliance. So they called this thing Gaia, which refers to a global consciousness. And in Avatar 2, you find out Pandora has a sentience. The Earth had a sentience, so Gaia is real. And that's highly significant that James Cameron brought this concept of Pandora's sentience as a main part of that theme, because that's the thing that he has in Terminator, the whole Skynet. But interestingly, the Na'vi who live on Pandora, this jungle moon, they can tap into the global consciousness with their hair by just plugging it in like a USB cord into the nearest tree or fish. They're connected to nature. And then the humans show up, these Marines with their shaved heads, and they cannot connect to nature. So they're making this point that the West is incompatible with the survival of Gaia. This is a big story, that they're telling in broad strokes, but when you look at it, it's been consistent. This idea of this eventual artificial intelligence God, or something that we're going to discover, this is being brought about by, of course, the WEF. But yes, Tesla's Optimus robots are fake. So to get through the rest of my notes here, Trump is going to be sentenced on November the 26th. There was a zombie star I mentioned the other day. It turns out it's called Corona Borealis. So a zombie star. Okay, here's what I found from the November the 3rd. Colin Kaepernick turns 36. He's significant because he was at the Super Bowl 47. And right now we're in the presidential race, number 47. And that was the Blackout Bowl, where it went dark for 33 minutes. Later, he became synonymous with kneeling, specifically National Anthem, which has very interesting symbolic connotations, but also he was kneeling before Derek Chauvin and BLM, and it was foreshadowing of that. So the 33 minutes of darkness may pertain, the Blackout Bowl, may pertain to what's coming up here soon. One World Trade Tower opened 11/3. 11/3's reference in the Baron Trump time-traveling book. And we've talked about this a bit. It's a book from 1888. Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. 10-year-old boy named Baron Trump, who has a mentor named Don, who's a rich man living on Fifth Avenue in New York City, travel to Russia and find a portal. And there's more, because the book opens up on a Tuesday, November the 3rd, in the midst of a disputed election. It's one of the oldest examples we have of predictive programming for Trump. After that would be 1958, Trackdown. And then, I'm kind of interested in this topic. What's up with the pet insecurity psyop? Whether it's Haitians or the government taking your animals, what's going on with that? I'll open up phones if anybody has any comments. Portal says the ignorance of the sheep coming off the school buses was abundant. Oh, are you talking about the shuttles from the event? Yeah, let's go ahead and we'll go into that. Tomorrow I'm going to be speaking with fakeologists, and I think one of the things we're going to discuss are the crowd responses to the, I guess, provocations. I mean, you have to understand, because some people thought, you were being too, I guess, provocative. Maybe you could have sat down and said, what made you want to become a Republican? Have you considered that the news is fake and everything you think is wrong? Like, no, that's not how you reach a mob. You're reaching a collective, and they do act as a collective, as you saw. And I was merely there to illustrate these points. There was no arguing with them. And besides, the way the event was structured there, it seemed like they didn't want any protesters. So what they did is you had to arrive by 5 a.m., between 5 and 7. They had the doors opening, so there was no place where I could have sat and discussed anything in a rational manner with anybody there. This wasn't the place to do in-depth interviews as though we're political scientists actually concerned about their flavor of brainwashing. It's not why I was there. But there was a rush to the door, and the Secret Service weren't going to let me take my sign inside. So I wouldn't be able to attract any attention. So the best thing I could do was just go down the line and see if anybody reacts. And I realized this group of people is uniformly, like, it's almost like they've been instructed, not even acknowledging what I'm saying, which is kind of peculiar in my opinion. And I want to talk about that some more. Okay, moving on. We talked about the bloody ear. That's just kind of one of these things I somehow missed. And phones are now open. J. Dig says 11.3 and 11.4 are fundamental in Q lore. I think there's more Q drops than Bible verses. And there's so many, in fact, that any prediction based on Q automatically qualifies as the sharpshooter fallacy. There's too many of them. And it's too easy to attach them to anything in a very subjective way. And there are no wrong answers. It cannot be falsified. If there's a wrong answer, you have to throw out your theory. Well, if the Q drop prophecies don't come true, like, so let's say, for example, if they don't arrest Hillary Clinton in 2017. Oh, wait, they didn't. Well, there you go. Your model's broken. If you can't explain these away, then your model's broken. And what they have done is they've said, well, no, it's going to happen next year on that date. And they call it the deltas. So now it's no longer about the year. It can come true on any one of these dates. And it's like, well, then why did these Q drops come out in 2016 for things that are going to happen 9 years later? Like, couldn't you just saved it, just scheduled some tweets for later? Like, why build up suspense for 8 years and drag people through the ups and downs? Have a couple of comments. Guys, Truth says, this is a great example of how incredibly outnumbered we are. Real Truth has very few followers. We stand alone. And that's in reference to the auto hoaxer at the Trump rally, Albuquerque. Yeah, that's actually a good point. I had that same feeling when I protested a climate change on Earth Day, a climate change event. I had realized at that point that there's 3,000 people there, and there's me. And where's everybody else? Like, why isn't there some, like, kind of widespread pushback against some kind of obvious propaganda agenda? And it's just not there. So good to know. But there are enough of us, I believe, once we're networked, to constitute a sizable, self-aware demographic that will no longer integrate with the mainstream box. And that's what we have to do. We have to break it. And that's why I'm not trying to do outreach. I'm not trying to save people. I'm not doing free therapy. It's like they're in their box, and we need to be able to see it. We need to be able to see, okay, this is an invisible box that confines their worldview. It's a closed system, and they cannot accept information from without. And here's one other point. The group there was all MSM. That's how I would classify them. Mainstream mediation. Had they been conspiracy theorists, MSM plus, they would have been open to what I was suggesting. that Butler was fake. But they would have said, oh, it was fake. It was a second shooter, and Biden did it. And they would have had a number of spin-off theories. The QAnon movement, for example, has all kinds of theories about how everything's fake, but it somehow is somewhat real. Very muddy, very muddled, and incoherent. But again, they're in the mainstream box. They're not even open to the possibility of a conspiracy. Interestingly, the conspiracy theorists are deeper in the programming because they're accepting the mainstream frame and adding on to it. But even though they are deeper in the programming, they're closer to the exit. They could actually break free entirely. It's almost like you have to go through Trutherville on the way out. I have a diagram that kind of explains how that would be. LCJ 1915 says, "Hi IPS, I love how you did this by yourself. I wish I could be there. I'm in Pittsburgh though, where Biden comes when the bridge collapsed. Trump comes later. Butler's 20 minutes from me." Interesting. The Cosby trial was here and the big tree of life shooting psyop, so I'm boots on the ground for our community. Good. And speaking of boots on the ground, I'm getting some new press passes. I know a number of you ordered some, and they are going to be produced here locally. I know it's just a coincidence, but the company I relied upon to do my press passes all of a sudden stopped producing them. Mike D says, "Tim, your studio has a NASA space station vibe going on." Yeah, I was thinking about that. I have a lot of stuff in the background, and I was thinking, okay, you're in space. You're in the space station, and you've seen the inside of it. It's just wires everywhere. What happens if you are, floating on your way, let's say to the treadmill, and you miss a handle? You can't stop yourself, and you end up crashing into some wires. You pull something loose. It's just such a hazard. Not to mention a potential fire hazard. Anyway, that thing has to come down at some point because the special effects are stuck in 2015. I mean, imagine that. The limiting factor on how far into space we can go is literally special effects. Okay, so here's an interesting response, and I like to see how people process this. I said Trump faked it. Radical Skeptic looked at my video and said, they may have planned a shooter fake shooting people at the rally to scare people from going to the rallies. And so I think Trump outsmarted them by becoming a hero, not the image they wanted of him running and hiding while people were being shot dead. So this is something I've heard from QAnoners, that Trump caught news somewhere that they were going to attempt to fake a shooting. So he outfaked the fakers by faking first and provided a script that made him look like a hero. And this is not accurate. I mean, it couldn't possibly be this. This is just someone who doesn't want to recognize that Trump is not on their side. So my response was, outsmarted them. He's one of them. That's the hardest thing for the Q cult to grasp, is that Trump was always one of them. They fell in love with the TV character. And it sounds, I mean, it's not cruelty on my part. It's cruel on the part of the engineers of this cult of personality, what they have done and what they have created. They've created a monster. And I think he's entertaining, sure, but just from the perspective of an outsider, like an anthropologist, they have created this insane, fanatical cult who have this something of an eschatology, end times prophecy built into their worldview. For example, here's Roseanne Barr. She's been a pretty loud exponent of this. The other day she was screeching about how Hillary Clinton eats babies. And here she's explaining how, and this is like the same stuff we heard in 2020. She said Trump is still the commander-in-chief. And so the interviewer asks, well, if he's the commander-in-chief, why is Biden getting blamed for all the stuff that's happening? And the way that Roseanne is trying to explain this is simply that America's a corporation and Trump's going to bring it back to a republic. And that right now the corporation is essentially in its last days as it's being destroyed from the inside, and Trump's going to reveal it. He's been in control this entire time. And they say that's why his hat says 45-47, because he's been president this whole time. This is not a new theory, but they brought out a lot of this old Q nonsense without the Q attached. And they use celebrities to sell people on this stuff. So here is Roseanne Barr.
He's still commander-in-chief.
100%.
Right.
You think that?
Yeah.
So, Roseanne, you think Trump is the current commander-in-chief of the United States of America?
Yes,
Currently?
I do.
Okay, what evidence do you have of that?
A whole bunch of executive orders from 2015. I'll share it with you.
Okay, so then all the stuff that's happened, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the inflation, the high prices, the consumer price index, is that now Trump's fault?
No, I told you Joe Biden is the president of a defunct corporation in D.C.
So somehow both these things are true at the same time. He's commander-in-chief, but he's not responsible for the bad things that happens. Some nonners have said that he had to step away so we could see how bad things are. I mean, this is making excuses for the person that's lying to you. And this is insanity. But this is Roseanne Barr promoting this stuff. This is not new. This is 8-year-old, stale, recycled breadcrumbs, Q drops.
Different things.
So
And I'll show you.
What are his roles?
Yeah, they call it devolution. Shed Dog is right about that. They call it devolution. And the thing is, it's not true. It can't possibly be true. It would only be possible if Trump were somehow autonomous. But he is the most predicted, the most pre-scripted fake character on the world stage. He is an actor playing a role. It's not hard to accept that Neil Armstrong was playing a role, cosplaying as an astronaut, or David Hogg, cosplaying as a school shooting victim. You can go through the list of people who are actors on the world stage, simulation actors, mass casualty actors. What makes him any different? And the fact that he has decades or a century plus of predictive programming, of scripting built into this. He's a historic personage. He's going to last for centuries, but he is a construct. Okay, let's see here. Let's continue. I'm not going to play too much of this other than just letting you know, just pointing out that this is not new and that she's been brought out because she's like, for some reason they use a lot of these outsider comedians to deliver MSM plus talking points.
That's too long of a conversation, but I'll show you. I'll show you all the stuff I have on it.
This is, I don't know this world. I generally don't.
Do you know who Dr. Jan Halper Hay? No, it's from Dr. Jan Halper Hay.
It is QAnon. They're trying to hide the Q. But anyway, moving on. And the good news is, if this... No, I shouldn't even... It's not going to go away, unfortunately. Now that I think about it, one of the elements of the Q movement is Seventh-day Adventism. It's actually kind of built into it, and its roots. So if you look at the Q movement, it's a Frankenstein cult comprised of Church Universal Triumphant, Seventh-day Adventism, and a number of other New Age elements. But the idea of the Great Disappointment, that the Seventh-day Adventists predicted that Jesus would return on a certain date, and he didn't, but that only caused them to deepen their faith, and that religion is still around. Similarly, the I Am Temple or the Church Universal Triumphant believed that China and Russia were going to nuke us into oblivion in the late 80s. Many of their members sold their assets, moved into bunkers. It didn't happen. Did they quit the cult? No. They said, we prayed so hard that we stopped World War III. So they took credit for saving the world. They didn't realize that they had been ripped off. Okay, getting back to a couple of things here. So again, that's the take on it, that Trump was somehow faking the other guys. No, the fakery comes from above. The fakery is signed off on at a level above the political divide. This is one of the first really big awakenings for me, was asking, why aren't right-wingers calling out the shooting psyops as what they are? Why are they pretending that these things are real? Why can't they go all the way? And then I saw the amount of money changing hands. Like, you're telling me Armalite's going to bleed out, they're going to hemorrhage $73 million, and they're not going to investigate the claims that they're being sued over propaganda? That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about false flags. We're not talking about black ops killing people to score political points. No, that's all paid. That's all truth or mythology. We're talking about propaganda, atrocity propaganda. There's no way that this company is going to pay out that much money over atrocity propaganda that's so poorly acted out and performed. Gene Rosen. So obviously they're in on it. And so then I recognize, okay, the right wing doesn't call out leftist psyops, and the left doesn't call out the right wing psyops. And the right wing psyops would be things like Allah Akbar, terrorists blowing themselves up. That the drama Muhammad contests, where the Islamic terrorists would come out of the mosques and shoot up the places. All these fake attacks that reinforced the war on terror narrative was kind of like that'd be coming from the right. Leo Pirate, Seventh-day Adventists didn't exist for the 1844. Well, yeah, the description of the Adventists, as I understand it, was brought up by the son of the founder of the Oath Keepers, and he had this interesting breakdown from his perspective as the son of this major league QAnoner type. But his name is Adam Dakota Adams. Here it is. Oath Keeper's son. And he describes his childhood, but his description of the influence of QAnon is fantastic. I don't want to go through it right now, but one of the influences is certainly this idea of they're predicting the return of JFK. And we talked about the JFK Jr. stuff quite a bit. I'm not a religious person. I'm not a believer in any of it. I happen to believe that the religions are just old school worldview monopolies. I think that's as simple as I can put it, that the mainstream media, or rather mainstream mediation writ large, it provides a worldview. And it's a worldview that's a monopoly. You can't add into it. Your views aren't acknowledged. And even the views that are censored are generally acknowledged first, like the ones that are publicly censored, like Alex Jones, for example. That means he's part of it. But it's a worldview monopoly. And it's how they maintain the knowledge disparity and the ability of the small group to manipulate the masses. Yeah, and that's a great point too. Dave Koresh was a Seventh-day Adventist. So here's another connection. Dave Koresh, Branch Davidians, 33-year-old, but he did claim that this was the end of the world, Jesus was coming back, and the ATF roasts him, right? Alex Jones was radicalized by this. Timothy McVeigh was radicalized by this. McVeigh, in retaliation, on the anniversary date, bombs the building in Oklahoma City. He's then executed at 33. Meanwhile, Alex Jones maintains his crusade against the gun grabbers. All goes back to Waco, where Trump kicked off his campaign. Trump kicked off his campaign in Waco 2 days after Netflix releases Waco, American Apocalypse. And in the trailer, they're like, the ATF went in to seize 1.6 million rounds. I'm like, 1.6? That sounds familiar. Alex Jones went on Piers Morgan, and he said 1776 will commence again if you try to take the guns, in response to the DHS purchasing 1.6 million hollow point rounds. Again, 1.6 has been a code attached to Dave Koresh, Alex Jones, from way back then. So it's highly significant that Koresh would be Seventh-day Adventist, and that these influences would be prevalent in QAnon. Because Q, of course, is inextricably intertwined with January 6th. Q sent the QAnon shaman. But these are all relevant connections. And on the last anniversary of Koresh's incineration, Trump was on trial, and Maxwell Azrello set himself on fire outside the courthouse. No coincidences. And the connections go deeper. And yes, McVeigh, inspired by Waco, executed on 6/11. Trump was shot at 6/11. The 6/11, or 11/6, got them underwater as a result of right-wing terrorism. 6/11, 11/6 has been consistently attached to the far right fringe and domestic violent extremism and their eventual retaliation, their Turner Diaries scenario. And McVeigh was inspired by Waco and also by the Turner Diaries. The author of the Turner Diaries was born on 9/11, 1933, and in it predicted attacks on the Capitol. Lots of predictive programming value in that. So McVeigh, inspired by Waco, executed on 6/11. And then Tim 611 is a symbol that's reoccurring in Sound of Freedom, because Tim Ballard was given some pendant that said Tim 611. And recently, this Ephesians 6:11 has been brought up again and again, saying that the armor of God saved Trump. Well, the Ephesians 6:11 armor of God thing has been a mainstay of right-wing mantras for some time, like right-wing fringe conspiracies, conspiracy theorists. People like Richie from Boston used to say it. He said you have to put on the full armor of God to protect you from the chemtrails. And like, what is this full armor of God 611 thing? And then I started picking up this pattern. Tonight's episode on The Penguin is worth watching. Okay, yeah, I'm going to watch it right after this. If you got disappointed in Joker 2, and a lot of people expressed some disappointment, Penguin makes up for it. But personally, I was not disappointed in it. It wasn't meant to do the same thing the first one was. But I think the purpose of Joker 2 was to make this connection between the world as a stage and Trump. Because if you remember, the world as a stage is the tagline of the movie Joker 2. And as Joker 2 was being filmed, people thought that the mob there for Joker at the courthouse were there for Trump because he happened to be inside. They had converged the two. And the movie consistently broke out into song, kind of like a sad musical. But these are just ways for them to break open the fourth wall to address the audience. And yeah, Timothy McVeigh he was obviously a Fed. Probably not his real name. He came back as Special Agent Paul Weissapal out there in Florida. Interestingly, he's credited with having saved 168 trafficked children. So Paul Weissapal, 168 trafficked children. See if I can find that article here. Yeah, this is fascinating because look, this is terrible. Yeah, child exploitation, major threat, said Paul Weissapal, special agent in charge of the FBI's Tampa field. 168 juveniles recovered. Horrible story. This is 2014. But yeah, this is a breakdown of the number of children who were recovered. Now, how many children did Timothy McVeigh kill? When he blew up the building, there was a government daycare. The bombing killed 168 people. 19 of them children. But significantly here, 168. In one character, he kills 168. In another character, he rescues 168. And if you look into the death of Timothy McVeigh, when he's executed, they had this classical musician perform at his death scene. The guy was 33. And they were talking about how McVeigh was 33, like Jesus, and how he was at this place that had 33 acres. His P.O. box was 33. It's really insane when you get into the numbers code. And again, he was 33 when he was executed 90 days before 9/11. And one of the things that really had me looking at that number 611 and its potential meaning is that he was the OBL of domestic violent extremists. And he dies on 6/11, like a martyr's death. And if you invert 6/11, 9/11, the difference is you got domestic or internal threat. 9/11, you had the external threat. And the lead hijacker, Mohammed Atta, was 33 when he crashed into the first of the towers that morning. So there's sort of a mirroring here. 1900 says, what do you think about those envelopes that were issued at Bush Sr.'s funeral? Just more Q lore. Like, okay, do you remember when Trump said on, was it 10/5/2017? he said, "This is the calm before the storm." And the media present asked him, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "You'll see." So the calm before the storm came to mean to the QAnoners that there would be this big storm where the good guys, the white hats, the military would get rid of all the Democrats. Never happened. Although the Capitol was stormed. And if you think about it, that had to have been the storm. That was a reference, like January 6th was your storm. You're not going to get another storm. That was it. The Q shaman, Q was all over it. Like that's as storm as it's going to get. But so as far as those envelopes being passed around, it's kind of a cool story. Like, oh, Hillary Clinton looks like she's been thrown into a van and JFK Jr.'s in there and they're taking her to Gitmo to kill her. There's just so much fan fiction built into the Q movement's world view that it's sort of a self-perpetuating cycle and it's never going to end. But there's no evidence for any of it. Leo Pirate says in Joker 2, when the jury decision is read out, it's for case GCO 7-1963. Fascinating. Good catch. 11/22 is the anniversary, the first anniversary of the date that of the day Leave the World Behind came out, and that takes place. So it comes out on 11/22. Takes place in zip code 11963. So you have a 1963. 119, which has all kinds of significance for the fall of the West, the fall of the Tower of Babel, Donnie Darko. The 119 thing is deep. Also on 11/22, Marilyn Manson's new album comes out, and it's called One Assassination Under God. And Marilyn Manson portrayed himself as he was JFK in a music video called Coma White. Rose McGowan was Jackie Kennedy. And in that music video, they had JFK on a cross, like his picture. And I'm like, that's interesting. So his storyline, as he explained it, was that JFK was the second coming. And he was killed by the bad guys. And so now the world's in mourning, waiting for the third Jesus, called President White. And so this video for Coma White was actually delayed because as soon as it was about to be released, JFK Jr. died. So that's kind of a weird connection. So he's portraying JFK dying, JFK Jr. dies, and Marilyn Manson commented on this, and I thought that's kind of strange because that's exactly what the Q movement believes. But this video came out in 1999. So I'm like, wait a minute here, how does that work? How did Marilyn Manson have the QAnon script 20 years prior? This idea of JFK being Christ. It's insane. 1900 says their reaction seems startling, didn't seem like acting. Yeah, but we don't have, like, it's all lore. So if you don't know what he's referring to, I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen. This was shown to me in 2017. What was in the envelopes? So at Bush Senior's funeral, the Bush family all looked appalled reading a letter given to them by Donald Trump. So there's this idea that all of them are showing some kind of shock because Donald Trump sent them a letter and he's getting their reactions because he's playing 5D chess. And in the letter he said, "I know what you did. I'm going to expose you all." So here you have it. Lip readers reveal what top leaders said during President Bush's funeral. So all the living presidents and vice presidents were together to mourn H.W. Bush. And so you have all these people gathered together, and some envelope is being passed around, and there's a lot of speculation about how they were given some kind of gloating letter by Trump saying something to the effect of, "You're all going to be hanged, you're going to Gitmo." Again, this is fantasy, in my opinion. I haven't seen anything to suggest there's any reality behind it. Leo Pirate says, like an IRL TV drama. Yeah, well, it's community-generated fan fiction. It reminds me of role-playing games, like Dungeons and Dragons. And this is all interesting now that I think about it. wasn't it Steven Jackson? The guy from the Illuminati playing cards? No, there was somebody else. I think there was another person named Jackson, but Steven Jackson did the Illuminati card game. But anyway, role-playing games in general are these sort of a mix between a script you're given and then your own improv, which gets included into it, and the story evolves according to your own improvisation. And I think there's some elements here of an alternate reality game and live action role playing. I mean, consider this. How many huge Q influencers built their reputations off of supposedly having connections to Trump? Like, oh, I know somebody who's got some sources that like Alex Jones played this card for years. Like, I got people who are friends, who I have friends who are high up in government. They tell me these things. And you can't really question that, because how can you? Because it's his source and he can't name his source. And for the last few years, you had people LARPing as though they had live action role playing, as though they were getting some kind of information from Q or Trump. It's all a live action role playing game. It's all fake. Jay Digg says, in another version, it was from George Sr. saying they know everything. Right. And that's all based on this presupposition that Trump is a good guy and he's going to drain the swamp. And it's amazing how that story has just, like, the pendulum's now the other way, where now the Daily Beast just released hundreds of hours of conversations with Epstein talking about Trump. And now it's like, look, this is new. Listen to the Jeffrey Epstein tapes. Quote, I was Donald Trump's closest friend. Newly released tapes. Jeffrey Epstein details close relationship with Trump. Close friends. Trump's horrific friendship with Epstein revealed in new audio. 100 hours from the ex-president. Donald Trump groped me in what felt like a twisted game. Jeffrey Epstein, who once shared girlfriends with Trump. And then there's one story that came out where he's describing how Trump would invite all his friends over to these parties and then he would sleep with their wives as a sort of a sport. So this just came out. But 8 years ago, the story was that Trump was hanging out with Epstein in order to blackmail Epstein and get all of the blackmail material and sink the deep state. And we're having this whole P. Diddy overlap, same story. But look how it shows up right before the election. This is why I'm releasing the Epstein tape, the Epstein Trump tapes. This is, again, Daily Beast. Epstein claimed Trump cuckolded his best friends, slept with their wives, serial cheat in his marriage. So if you're going to believe the other stuff, why wouldn't we believe this? Like, why would we believe that Trump... And if Trump was exposing the deep state, exposing all these pervs with their eyes wide shut parties, why hasn't he done it yet? Why is he letting it get this far? And all this stuff's really bizarre. Like, think about the Stormy Daniels thing. So the Stormy Daniels story, the storm is coming, and then people said, hey, the Stormy Daniels is some kind of connection here. Well, weirdly enough, the first arrest will shock the world Q drop is Q drop number 55. And I don't know. I don't know what to make of this stuff, other than it's all contrived. Let me see if anyone has any insights here. Interactive programming, a veritable do-it-yourself brainwashing, says Leo Pirate. You know, it's exactly like that. The mainstream mentality is to believe what you see on the screen. The truther mentality is to say all that's fake. But instead, they believe what they get from other sources. So they have like hundreds of sources and they piece together do-it-yourself brainwashing and they decide what they're going to believe in. It's just as subjective as the mainstream view, but they feel like since they assembled it themselves, they weren't spoon-fed. No, the mainstreamers are spoon-fed, and then you pick up the breadcrumbs from the floor, and then you feed yourself. It's the same net result. Jay Digg says, another Q post said that Q post 55 would come on a Friday while Trump was aboard a plane. even if one Q drop comes true, the 10,000 that were fake kind of override that, and it's been 9 years. And I understand the hopium. There's an addiction here, and it's not dissimilar from the gambler's addiction, like the gambler fallacy, where when something, and this is true with prophecy, with a lot of prophecy cults, when it doesn't come true, the impulse is to think, well, it's more likely to come true next time. Like, I lost 50 times in a row on this slot machine, so the next time it's more likely to win. And it's because you sense that there's got to be some kind of a balance in nature, and that eventually the odds are it's going to, like, no. Just because you lost 50 times in a row doesn't mean it's more likely to win the next time. Statistically, it does not. Each instance has to be looked at as separate from what came before. So when a prophecy doesn't come true, you can't say it's more likely to come true next year because eventually it's going to come true, and now we're 1 year closer. That's kind of the same fallacy. But I'm glad to see that the QAnon movement is no longer proudly throwing around their Q stuff, and they're kind of camouflaging it, because I think we're all kind of sick of it. Okay, moving on. Let me go through some comments on the video. This is referring to the auto hoaxer at the Trump rally in Albuquerque. Lots of comments on this one. And I have another a video that's one that was mirrored, actually. And on the mirrored video, there's like 100-some plus comments. So I'm going to pull that one up as well. And the channel where you can find that one is called, I think it's number 4. Let me double check it. The News is Fake, number 4. Let's just take a look and see here. The News is Fake 4. And he mirrored the video. He does a lot of content here. I'll see if I can find it. But I want to go through the comments and see if there's anything new. Water Walking says, I think the number one reason people do not engage with you is they have nothing to do with Trump or Kamala. It's the fact that they don't want to be on camera. That could be it. Let's see here. They're just there to see the orange man, not for good news. They probably think you're a Democrat or just crazy. We're outnumbered, says R.A. Movie. Yes, I agree. Jules Kincaid says, this guy's now on a list and will one day get room serviced Hanaye style. I guess that means my cell phone's going to explode. MAGA cult makes Jim Jones look like child's play, says David Pecker, 88. Yeah, I don't know what I would call this other than true believers. And there's nothing wrong with, being a true believer. I'm not trying to pull them out of their political cult, but I think it's fascinating to watch it from an anthropologist perspective, kind of outsider, because we have watched this closely from the fringe to the more mainstream elements to it, and it's been a fascinating study. What I'm mostly interested in finding out is the point where people are able to just say, okay, I was completely wrong about this. Like, I would happily do that. Prove to me that the space station is not fake, and I will happily talk about it. But I don't get that very often from people. Like, I've been really challenging the chemtrail type people. It's like, is there a point where you might just say, okay, I've been wrong this whole time, it's not predictable? And to date, very few people, like 1 or 2, have actually said that they changed their mind. And there's this quote that is attributed to Mark Twain: it's easier to fool a person than to convince them that they have been fooled. And I find that to be just perfectly true here. I mean, people are intransigent, and they hate. It's like George Bush said about the saying in Tennessee: "Fool me once, shame on, can't be fooled again." However he butchered it, they don't want to admit they've been fooled twice. Oh, they made it private. For some reason, The mirrored video went private. That doesn't make sense. The News is Fake 4 had a video mirroring the rally, and for some reason it went private. I'm not sure if it's just me. Nope. Sign in if you've been granted access. I wonder if he got the call. They said you can't share this video. Oh well. It was getting a lot of traction and a lot of comments, and I did go through them, and most of the people were remarking on how little reaction, how people were huddled together and almost seemed like they weren't willing to engage because they were either insecure or scared, non-comprehending. Some suggested that a lot of them looked like they were paid to be there, which I don't necessarily think so. Although who knows? Crowds on demand. You can actually rent mobs. Leo Pirate says, George Bush made me aware of presidential actors playing roles. He used to be an eloquent speaker at Yale, then suddenly played a fool as a commander-in-chief. Yeah, I always thought that was some kind of a Machiavellian ploy. I'll check out Tenet. Someone mentioned Tenet. That's a Christopher Nolan. Anything Christopher Nolan, anything Jonathan Nolan, these are metascriptors. And their work is often predictive. And there's a connection between the Crocus shooting in Russia and the movie Tenet. And again, Russia, Tenet, and then I guess Christopher Nolan's connection with Fallout and Westworld. Again, you're dealing with the theme of the nuke. And this all comes back to here where you have right-wingers like Benny Johnson and Tim Pool and many others who are supposedly being paid by Russia. $100K a week to push propaganda. And the company that they were getting funded by is called Tenet. So like, what's the connection? Russia, Tenet, Christopher Nolan. One of the connections is that one of the stories, the main theme behind the Turner Diaries, is that you have a nationalists, like right-wing nationalists, push back against the New World Order. And that there's some kind of collusion between Russia and the right wing. And that's what's being intimated by the revelation of some of these provocateurs being paid by Russia. Now, I don't think it's true, obviously, because I don't think there are different competing governments. Everybody's part of the same space program. And what is the space program? It's not all these different nations trying to make it into space. No, the space program is about programming your inner space, the space between your ears, and always has been. It's always been worldview warfare, and that's why all the governments agree to fake space. Algae Rhythm says, I get bored of the repetition of predictive programming material, but it's important to bring this point home. I'm interested in the bigger picture. Oh, what is bigger? What could be a bigger picture than the fact that we've unmasked a monolithic, ubiquitous control system that encompasses all mankind? Like, we have actually provided evidence of this. And there's all kinds of conspiracy theories and conjecture that never came to a full explanation of what we're looking at. And what we are looking at is the massification of the human mind, where it's all part of this collective worldview that is the product of a power elite and their monopoly on perception. And they do it with our coercion, with our cooperation. And predictive programming is the only clue. It's actually the most blatant clue of how rigged our reality is. So what we're doing here is media analysis. You can't analyze what the programmed are thinking unless you look at the programming. And that's why I look at the programming incessantly. I'm not all that interested necessarily in going much further than that because I want to remain objective. There are plenty of people who engage in synchromysticism and paranormal speculation, and they never come up with any answers. It's a cul-de-sac. I think our answers are going to come from an objective analysis, and I personally think it's more interesting. Like, truth is stranger than fiction. Yeah, I think it's more interesting when you get down to it, that all these various conspiracy theories about these groups and reptilians and QAnon, it falls short of explaining what's really going on, and it's not as interesting. I actually have to head out of here in about 3 minutes, so I can take a short call if you want to try calling right back. Yeah, try calling again. I don't know why it didn't ring. We actually have about 5 more minutes, so it can... And I also want to point out, too, there is no other channel on the internet that makes it its sole purpose the analysis of the propaganda, past and present, retro auto-hoaxing, concurrent programming. No one else have made this their focus because they underestimate the significance of the fakery. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, Tim, it's Leo Pirate.
Hey, what's up?
It just calling in to kind of go off of Algae Rhythm's comment. I did want to say predictive programming analysis for me is just fascinating because it grounds you in, like, there are real people behind this, like there are meta scripters, and it just provides a whole new, like, trail of people to look into. So I think what it was with you and I, we've talked about 28 Days Later. Alex Garland, screenplay writer for that, also wrote A24 Civil War. Looked into their other films. They had also done this movie called Men, which is just another one of these, like, artsy, weird movies about men bad. And I was looking at Timothy McVeigh recently on the Wikipedia page in pop culture. There was a book called Mirage that had him as a fictional character, and this author, Matt Ruff, wrote this book called Bad Monkeys, and it's this sci-fi, a horror novel in the future where there's an organization that deals with taking out people that are considered bad monkeys, usually just people who are beyond being corrected in what's it called, through correctional facilities or anything. They're taken out. They're called bad monkeys. So I just wanted to call in to give that comment that, like, predictive programming is awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Great points there, and thanks for bringing that up because the concerted messaging is what we're actually talking about. Like, I think it's incredibly fascinating that we see this 90-foot tall statue of a monkey god as millions of people in a record-breaking release are immersed in a video game where they're playing that very character, the monkey god. As the monkeypox is released, Bad Monkey comes out 28 days later, Planet of the Apes, the Chimp Crazy HBO special, and then there's some monkey loose somewhere in Ohio where all at once it's all just apes, monkeys, rage virus. And then it all kind of comes together. I'm like, okay, this is concerted messaging across all kinds of platforms all at once. And you wouldn't have this perspective if you didn't recognize it as a monolithic whole. So, predictive programming analysis, concurrent programming analysis, the examination of the programming from the programmers to the programmed, it's endlessly fascinating.
I just think the problem is whenever I try to, share it with some people, I think they have a big problem with compartmentalization or even just staying focused. Because when I try to show examples of predictive programming just to establish the existence of the phenomenon, immediately they go to, oh, so what? Like, you're seeing this director or this writer as a part of this secret society, are they all interconnected? And I'm like, whoa, calm down. I don't know how it was implemented necessarily, right? I don't know their connections. I'm just showing you something that transcends a mere, eerie coincidence. These exist, yeah.
Yeah, it's simply propaganda. Predictive programming is propaganda. And one thing that I maintain here is that from the off-world stage perspective, you can only communicate unacknowledged info to MSM+. They're the only ones who are open. The mainstream mediation prevents them from even accessing that information. You cannot reach them with it. It'd be like being in some religion and trying to convince an atheist to just take your side on faith. They don't have that faith. And there's a fundamental distinction between a believer and a knower. The main and alt media consumers are passive media consumers. They're passively taking it from their sources. The only active news consumers or media consumers, and media as in all entertainment and everything, are skeptics. And so the passive media consumers cannot understand the skeptical stance because they are believers, not knowers, and they get everything secondhand. So they don't have authority over their own belief system to even understand what you're trying to break down to them. And it's futile. But it's useful sometimes because if you feel like you're talking to a wall, you are. And that's what I was demonstrating at the rally. I was just showing, hey, there's a wall here. They can't access this. It's literally true. That's how the power elite rule over us. This compartmentalization, and it's powerful.
And they were so passive and low energy. It was almost a little sad. But I will say, with the Butler, 713 thing, I thought there was a small window of opportunity, because I know an MSM normal person who's a total hates Trump, all that stuff. And I actually got them on board when I was showing them the scene from Machete and all that kind of. I was like, look at this, like this is an example, and they were totally on board with it. Until I started going to more examples that are now, I'm like, okay, now you can see, here's a school shooting later. No. So basically, they were only interested in that angle because it would be evidence against Trump, but they're still in the box, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you're always dealing with the bloody guardrails. It's it's a new term I have to add to the lexicon. The guardrails, if it's got blood on it, they can't go further, and that's trauma-induced mind control.
Oh yeah, because it's so right. It's like trauma-based mind control on a mass scale. So it can be done individually to someone through abuse, but on a mass scale, you create a news story with such a tragedy, like a fireman died, or 33 children died, or something like that. To deny it, you're seen as ghoulish, terrible, Yeah. But I know you have to go.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the call very much, and as always, we'll talk soon. Thank you again for your call and all your insights. Always interesting calls with Leo Pirate. And my objective is not at all to disturb Normieville. Why would I? Unless they're paying me. Like, if somebody wanted to pay me as a therapist to help them understand the simulation and how it's not the same as the real world, how the map's not the territory, I could. You want us to un-F your minds, it's not something that I don't think you could actually have someone do for you. Honestly, I think it has to be from within. But that's not my objective. I think it's a waste of time. I liken our perspective here, or our position, of being like a group of atheists in a theocratic society, and you understand the fallacious roots of their religion. Like, you talk about it, you're going to get stoned, you're going to be impugned, you're going to be exiled. Like, nobody wants to hear the truth. Now, my objective is not to wake people up, because what are my qualifications anyway? And why would I? Why would some guy with a MAGA cap invested in this political party want to sit down and listen to a stranger telling him he's wrong about everything? Like, that sounds insane and arrogant, and it sounds absurd and futile. I think the most sensible thing right now is to recognize that some people are in the main box, some have strayed into the alternative boxes, and some have recognized the value in stepping outside of the box, but it's a very small number, and we're scattered throughout. The only people who are even reachable have moved into the alternative box. So our objective here is to go over the heads of the mainstream and reach out to those who have strayed into the alternative boxes where they're even reachable. And then as we shoot down those various guardrails that keep them in the controlled opposition, more of them will join us, and will comprise what I call the parallel media, which is like a third branch. There needs to be a third branch of media that is only for those with the skeptical, active perspective, as in active consumers of media, actively paying attention, not passively accepting it all as true because you haven't debunked it. And I categorically reject a lot of news just based on its obvious political utility. It's so easy, like the squirrel story. How long did it take you to say to yourself that this squirrel story is likely some kind of a psyop? Like, it wasn't all that complicated. You save yourself a lot of time when you have a better methodology for processing the news media. So here you have it. Here's a picture of the squirrel. And apparently the OnlyFans squirrel daddy is the person who used the squirrel to build his channel. And then you have truthers putting up images like this: "Avenge me, Peanut the squirrel, vote Trump." So again, right-wingers are being hit with all kinds of, they're going to kill your pets. The immigrants are going to take your pets. The government's going to take your pets. Like, what is that? That's funny. LG Rhythm says, people tell me about the U.S. elections. I tell them I don't watch those movies. The look of confusion on their face is interesting. Yeah, I've never, look, and I live this stuff. I talk about this all the time. I cannot recall the last time a normie, as in somebody, a mainstream mediated person, came up to me and said, hey, can you explain this to me? It hasn't happened. No, it never comes up in a conversation. And like it was last year on 10/8, someone said to me, did you hear about those 40 decapitated babies? And I said, oh yeah, nice weather today. And they were like, yeah, it's great weather. You want to go hiking? And I was like, okay, so this person is in Normieville. They heard about these decapitated babies. I know it's fake. They think it's real. I'm like, it doesn't matter. And they agree with me. So they're apathetic because they believe it's real, but it's not enough to motivate them to care. I'm not apathetic. I'm informed about it. I know it's fake, so I don't care. So that's why I say that we have a moral high ground, because we're not apathetic and ignoring atrocities. Rather, we're recognizing atrocity propaganda and unplugging from the obligatory reactions you're supposed to have to it. But it never comes up. Although on 7/13, I got a text from some relative I didn't even know listened. And this person said, hey, just like you were saying, Trump just got shot. I'm like, oh, that's funny. I didn't know you were listening. Because I tell people in my family, I'm like, don't listen to me. What are you doing? You should not be listening to me. All right, well, this has been great. I have to get back to work on a few other things. If you're waiting on art or press passes, everything's going out tomorrow. And look, resistance is futile. If you're in the box, there's no point in getting a bunch of truthers together to fight the deep state, because the deep state is fake. You can get all your truther friends and build a bunker and hide from nukes that don't exist. To hide from non-existent threats. What's the point? You can't go off the grid until you're off the grid mentally. And you're not off the grid mentally if you're in the mainstream mediated box, which conflates the model, the sim, with reality. All right, this is Lucifer Tim, 33rd Degree. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow.
To be